Most people spend their lives chasing goals. They set targets, make promises to themselves, push hard for a few weeks, and then slowly drift back to where they started. It feels like a discipline problem. It feels like a motivation problem. But often, it isn't either. It's a systems problem. If you look closely at consistent success, whether in business, health, investing, creativity, or leadership, you'll notice something subtle but powerful. The people who sustain results over long periods are rarely operating on bursts of willpower. They are operating inside carefully built systems. And those systems quietly carry them forward, even on days when motivation is low and energy is thin. A system is not a goal. A goal is an outcome. A system is the process that produces that outcome. A goal says, I want to build a successful company. A system defines how you spend your mornings, how you track customers, how you make decisions, how you hire, how you review progress, how you adjust when things break. A goal is a snapshot of the future. A system is the structure of your present. This distinction seems small at first, but it changes everything. When you focus on goals, you live in constant evaluation. You are either winning or losing. You either hit the number or you didn't. There's a quiet anxiety that comes with this mindset. It makes you measure your worth against outcomes that are often influenced by forces beyond your control. When you focus on systems, your attention shifts to inputs. Did you follow the process? Did you execute the routine? Did you refine the mechanism? Now your sense of progress becomes more stable. You can't always control results, but you can control whether you show up and run your system. Think of an investor who studies businesses for 2 hours every morning. The goal might be financial freedom. But the system is the daily reading, the structured evaluation framework, the written investment thesis, the rule about position sizing, the discipline of reviewing mistakes. Over years, that system compounds. The goal becomes a byproduct. Or consider someone trying to improve their health. A goal might be losing 20 pounds. A system is the grocery shopping ritual, the meal preparation rhythm, the sleep schedule, the environment that removes junk food from sight, the regular movement built into daily life. The weight changes because the system changes. What makes systems so powerful is that they shape behavior automatically. And behavior, repeated consistently, creates identity. You don't become disciplined by chasing discipline. You become disciplined by living inside a structure that makes the disciplined action the easiest action. Most failures are not dramatic collapses. They are friction problems. The path you intended to follow simply had too much resistance. The alternative path was easier. Humans will almost always choose the path of least friction. Systems work because they redesign friction. If you want to write every day, the system is not try harder. It is placing your notebook on your desk the night before. It is writing at the same time each morning. It is turning off notifications. It is lowering the bar so low that starting feels effortless. Once you start, momentum carries you. The deeper insight here is that systems operate below the level of emotion. You don't need to feel inspired to follow a routine that is embedded into your environment. You don't need to feel confident to execute a checklist. The system absorbs emotional fluctuations. It becomes your stability. This is why organizations that rely purely on heroic individuals often burn out. They celebrate star performers who save the day. But without a system, success depends on constant intensity. Over time, that intensity fades. On the other hand, organizations built around clear processes, defined roles, documented workflows, and feedback loops create predictable outcomes. They don't depend on extraordinary effort every day. They depend on repeatable structures. And here is something even more subtle. Systems reveal reality. Goals can hide weaknesses. You can chase a target for months without understanding why you are stuck. A system, however, exposes flaws immediately. If your process consistently produces poor results, the problem is visible. Now you can refine the system instead of blaming yourself. This shift, from self-judgment to system design, is liberating. Instead of asking, why am I so inconsistent, you ask, what in my environment makes consistency difficult? Instead of saying, I lack discipline, you ask, what structure would make the disciplined action automatic? In business, this thinking changes how you scale. Many founders believe growth comes from working harder. But growth actually comes from building systems that produces value, rather than a chaotic reflection of your energy. In personal finance, a system might be automatic investing on the first day of every month. Money flows into diversified assets without needing a decision each time. The investor does not wake up every month asking, should I invest now? The system already decided. Over decades, that small automation creates enormous wealth. Not because of genius timing, but because of consistency. The same principle applies to relationships. If you want strong relationships, the system might be a weekly dinner without phones. A monthly check, in conversation. A habit of sending a message every Friday to someone you care about. Small, structured behaviors protect connection from the erosion of busyness. Systems also protect you from your worst impulses. When markets are volatile, investors feel fear and greed. But a written investment policy, clear rules about asset allocation and rebalancing, acts as a guardrail. You don't improvise under pressure. You follow the system. Over time, something interesting happens. As your systems mature, your confidence stops coming from hope. It comes from design. You know that if you continue to execute your processes, results will follow. Not instantly, not dramatically, but predictably. This mindset reduces stress. You stop obsessing over short-term fluctuations. You start focusing on refining inputs. Instead of asking, "Did I win today?" you ask, "Did I follow the system today?" The second question is far more empowering. But there is a hidden challenge here. Building a system requires humility. It requires admitting that raw talent is not enough. It requires slowing down to design routines, document steps, test assumptions, and remove friction. Many people resist this because it feels boring. They want excitement. They want breakthroughs. Yet breakthroughs are often the result of long periods of stable systems quietly compounding beneath the surface. And this brings us to an important realization: systems are not static. They are living structures. They require feedback. If something isn't working, you don't abandon the entire vision. You adjust the mechanism. This is where most people misunderstand systems. They think a system means rigidity. In reality, a good system includes built-in review and adaptation, a weekly reflection, a monthly performance review, a quarterly reset. The structure provides stability, but also space for evolution. The real power of systems lies in how they transform identity. When you follow a system long enough, you stop thinking of yourself as someone trying to improve. You become the type of person who naturally operates in a certain way. You are not forcing discipline. You are expressing it. And once identity shifts, behavior becomes effortless. But there is a deeper layer beneath all of this. If systems are so powerful, why don't more people build them? Why do we continue to rely on motivation, even when we know it fades? What internal resistance prevents us from designing structures that would make our lives easier? To understand that, we need to explore the psychological tension between control and comfort, and why the human mind often prefers chaos over structure, even when structure leads to freedom. There is something strangely comforting about chaos. It sounds counterintuitive, but many people unconsciously prefer a life that feels reactive. When things are disorganized, when outcomes are uncertain, when results depend on bursts of effort, there is always an excuse available. If you fail, it was because things were messy. If you underperform, it was because you were overwhelmed. Chaos protects the ego. Structure exposes it. The moment you build a system, you remove the hiding place. If you commit to writing 500 words every morning at 7, and you create an environment that makes that possible, then the only variable left is you. If the words do not appear, you cannot blame inspiration. You cannot blame timing. You must confront the reality of your behavior. That level of clarity is uncomfortable. Systems demand responsibility. And responsibility feels heavy before it feels freeing. There is also a deeper psychological tension at play. Humans crave control, but they also resist constraints. A system introduces boundaries. It defines when you work, how you decide, what rules you follow. At first glance, that can feel limiting. It feels like giving up spontaneity. But what appears to be restriction often becomes liberation. When you no longer have to make the same small decisions repeatedly, your mind becomes lighter. Decision fatigue quietly drains energy every day. What should I eat? When should I exercise? Should I invest now or wait? A well-designed system reduces the number of decisions you need to make. It transforms recurring questions into automatic responses. The energy you once spent on trivial choices becomes available for deeper thinking. This is why experienced investors create checklists. Before buying a company, they review predefined criteria: revenue growth, competitive advantage, management integrity, debt levels, margin trends. They do not rely purely on intuition in the moment. The checklist anchors them. It protects them from emotional impulses that feel convincing in the short term but destructive over time. In business operations, the same principle applies. When customer service responses are standardized, quality becomes consistent. When onboarding processes are documented, new hires integrate faster. When sales scripts are tested and refined, performance stabilizes. Systems do not eliminate creativity. They create a reliable foundation on which creativity can operate. Without structure, creativity becomes scattered. With structure, it becomes focused. Another reason people resist systems is impatience. Systems compound slowly. They rarely deliver dramatic overnight transformation. Instead, they produce incremental progress that becomes visible only after weeks, months, or years. Modern culture rewards visible breakthroughs, viral growth, sudden success, overnight transformation. But sustainable achievement almost never looks like that. It looks repetitive. It looks ordinary. It looks like someone quietly doing the same effective behaviors long enough for the results to accumulate. This is where trust becomes critical. You must trust the process before you see the outcome. Consider physical training. If you follow a structured strength program, the changes in the first week are minimal. In the first month, they are modest. But over a year, the body transforms. The system works because it respects biology. Small stress, consistent recovery, gradual progression. There is no drama, just adherence. Financial systems work the same way. Automatic monthly investments into diversified assets may seem insignificant at first. The numbers grow slowly. It feels almost disappointing. But over decades, compound growth turns small contributions into substantial wealth. The magic is not in timing the market. It is in refusing to interrupt the system. Interruptions are the enemy of compounding. This applies emotionally as well. If you are building confidence, the system might be daily exposure to small risks. Speaking up once in meetings. Initiating one difficult conversation each week. Sharing your ideas publicly in manageable ways. Each action is minor. But over time, your identity shifts. You stop seeing yourself as hesitant. You become someone who acts despite discomfort. Systems quietly rewire self-perception. Yet it is important to recognize that not all systems are helpful. Many people are already living inside systems they never consciously designed. Waking up late, checking the phone immediately, reacting to messages all day, eating whatever is convenient, spending money impulsively. These are systems too, just poorly designed ones. If you repeat a behavior consistently, it becomes a structure. And structures produce outcomes whether you intended them or not. The difference between accidental systems and intentional systems is awareness. Once you understand that every repeated behavior forms a pattern, you begin to see your life as an interconnected network of processes. Your morning routine affects your focus. Your focus affects your work quality. Your work quality affects your income. Your income affects your stress. Your stress affects your relationships. Everything links together. Instead of trying to fix outcomes directly, you start tracing them back to the underlying structure. If income is unstable, perhaps the sales system lacks follow-up mechanisms. If health is declining, perhaps the sleep system is broken. If relationships feel distant, perhaps there is no structured time for connection. By identifying the system beneath the symptom, you address causes rather than surface effects. There is also an emotional shift that happens when you begin thinking this way. You stop personalizing failure. Instead of saying, "I'm bad at this," you say, "The system needs improvement." That small change in language preserves self-respect while encouraging accountability. It becomes a design problem, not a character flaw. And design problems can be solved. However, building effective systems requires clarity about what truly matters. If your goals are vague, your systems will be fragile. You cannot design a stable process around confusion. This is why reflection is essential. You must decide what kind of life you are building before determine the structure you create. A founder who values autonomy will build different systems than one who values rapid expansion at any cost. An investor focused on preservation will design different rules than one chasing aggressive growth. Systems reflect priorities. And once those priorities are embedded into routines, they guide behavior automatically. You no longer debate your values each day. They are expressed through your structure. But there is still one layer we have not explored. Even with clear priorities and well-designed systems, life introduces uncertainty. Markets shift, health changes, technology evolves, relationships transform. No system remains perfect forever. So the real question becomes this: how do you build systems that are strong enough to provide stability, yet flexible enough to adapt when reality inevitably changes? That balance between consistency and evolution is where the true mastery of systems begins. Stability without flexibility eventually becomes fragility. At first, a well-designed system feels powerful. It brings order. It produces consistent results. It reduces stress. But if that system becomes rigid, if it cannot respond to changing conditions, it slowly turns into a trap. What once created growth begins to limit it. The real strength of a system is not in how tightly it controls behavior, but in how intelligently it adapts. Think about nature. The most resilient ecosystems are not the most controlled ones. They are the ones with feedback loops. When conditions shift, the system adjusts. If one food source declines, another expands. If weather patterns change, species adapt or migrate. Stability comes from dynamic balance, not from stiffness. The same principle applies to personal and professional systems. In investing, markets evolve. Industries rise and fall. New technologies disrupt old business models. An investor who blindly follows a decades-old strategy without reassessment will eventually suffer. But an investor with a structured review process, quarterly portfolio evaluations, annual thesis reassessments, predefined rebalancing rules, adapts without becoming reactive. The core philosophy remains intact, but the implementation evolves. This is the difference between panic and adjustment. Panic is emotional and impulsive. Adjustment is structured and thoughtful. A system that includes scheduled reflection prevents emotional overreaction while still allowing intelligent change. In business, this might look like weekly operational reviews, monthly financial analysis, and quarterly strategic planning. Instead of waiting for a crisis to force change, the system creates regular moments to ask hard questions. What is working? What is breaking? Where are margins shrinking? Where are customers hesitating? By embedding these questions into the calendar, improvement becomes continuous rather than chaotic. On a personal level, flexibility might mean reassessing your routines as your life circumstances shift. A morning routine that worked when you were single may not work when you have children. A productivity system that fit a corporate job may not suit entrepreneurship. If you cling to old structures out of pride, you create unnecessary friction. The goal is not to preserve the system at all costs. The goal is to preserve the outcome the system was designed to produce. This requires emotional maturity. Many people attach their identity to their methods. If the method stops working, they feel personally threatened. But a system is a tool, not a belief. It exists to serve you. When it no longer serves, you refine it. There is also a deeper lesson here about control. Systems give you influence over your environment, but they do not eliminate uncertainty. Life will always contain variables you cannot predict. Economic downturns, health challenges, unexpected opportunities. The presence of uncertainty does not mean your system failed. It means reality is complex. What systems can do is increase your response capacity. If you have financial reserves because you followed a disciplined saving system, a job loss becomes stressful but not catastrophic. If you have maintained your health through consistent habits, illness becomes easier to recover from. If you have built strong relationships through intentional connection, personal crises feel less isolating. Systems do not remove difficulty. They create resilience. Resilience is often misunderstood as toughness. In reality, resilience is preparation. It is the quiet accumulation of small protective behaviors that reduce the impact of shocks. Emergency funds, insurance, skill development, network building, emotional regulation practices. None of these feel dramatic in the moment, but together, they create. When your business runs on documented processes, you can take time off without collapse. When your health is strong, you can pursue demanding opportunities. Systems expand your choices. Without them, you live reactively. Every decision feels urgent because there is no buffer. You are constantly negotiating with immediate pressure. Over time, that pressure narrows your thinking. You choose what solves today, not what builds tomorrow. Another powerful aspect of systems is how they shape culture, whether in a company or in your own household. Culture is simply repeated behavior over time. If meetings always start on time, punctuality becomes the norm. If feedback is routinely encouraged, honesty becomes natural. If gratitude is expressed regularly at home, appreciation becomes embedded. Culture is not created by speeches. It is created by systems. If you want a culture of excellence, you design performance reviews that reward quality. If you want a culture of learning, you allocate budget and time for education. If you want a culture of accountability, you define clear metrics and follow through consistently. The system teaches people what truly matters. And this applies inwardly as well. Your personal culture, your standards, your habits, your expectations of yourself, is built by what you repeat. There is also an important warning hidden in all of this. Systems amplify whatever they are designed to do. If the design is flawed, the damage compounds. A business with an aggressive sales system but no quality control may scale rapidly, and collapse just as fast. A personal productivity system that ignores rest may increase output temporarily, and lead to burnout. This is why alignment matters. Your systems must be aligned with your long-term well-being, not just short-term performance. When designing any system, it helps to ask a simple question. If I repeat this process for 10 years, who will I become? What will my life look like? If the answer feels sustainable and fulfilling, the system is likely healthy. If the answer feels exhausting or hollow, adjustments are needed. Ultimately, the power of systems lies in quiet consistency. They do not rely on mood. They do not depend on talent alone. They function in the background, turning small daily actions into meaningful outcomes. But there is one final layer to understand. Even the most elegant system is useless without commitment. At some point, you must decide that you are the type of person who honors your own structures. You must close the gap between intention and execution. That decision cannot be automated. It is deeply personal. The moment you take ownership of your systems, everything changes. You stop waiting for the perfect time. You stop blaming circumstances. You begin designing your days deliberately. You understand that freedom is not the absence of structure, it is the presence of intelligent structure. And when you truly grasp that, you no longer chase goals with desperation. You build processes with patience. You focus less on dramatic wins and more on repeatable excellence. Over time, the results speak quietly for themselves. The remarkable thing is that once you start seeing life through the lens of systems, you cannot unsee it. Every outcome becomes traceable. Every improvement becomes designable. Every setback becomes feedback. And that awareness is where real power begins. If you step back far enough, you begin to notice something almost unsettling. Your life right now is the output of the systems you've been running for years. Your income reflects your financial habits and career structures. Your health reflects your daily movement, sleep, and nutrition patterns. Your relationships reflect your communication rhythms and emotional responses. Even your level of confidence reflects repeated internal conversations you've had with yourself. Nothing is random. This realization can feel heavy at first. It removes the illusion that circumstances alone are responsible. But if you sit with it long enough, it becomes empowering. Because if your current reality was built by systems, even unconscious ones, then your future can be redesigned the same way. The shift begins with observation. Before you change anything, you need to see clearly. Most people try to fix outcomes without studying the machinery producing them. They set new goals at the beginning of each year without examining the habits that defeated last year's goals. They switch strategies without understanding why the previous ones failed. A thoughtful builder of systems does the opposite. They slow down. They audit. What does your average day actually look like? Not your ideal day, your real one. When do you wake up? What is the first thing you touch? How many hours are your relationships? These are not moral questions. They are structural questions. When you look honestly, patterns emerge. You may notice that your mornings are fragmented by notifications. You may see that your spending decisions happen when you are tired. You may realize that important conversations are postponed because there is no scheduled time for them. Patterns reveal leverage points. A leverage point is a small structural change that produces disproportionate results. Moving your phone out of the bedroom might improve sleep, which improves focus, which improves work quality, which improves income. Automating savings might remove constant financial stress. Scheduling 1 hour of uninterrupted thinking each day might generate ideas that shift your career trajectory. The beauty of leverage is that it doesn't require massive effort. It requires thoughtful placement. Many people exhaust themselves trying to overhaul their lives all at once. They attempt extreme diets, radical productivity systems, aggressive financial plans. The intensity feels satisfying in the beginning, but it is rarely sustainable. When the system demands too much willpower, it eventually collapses. Sustainable systems are almost boring. They are designed to be repeatable on your worst days, not just your best ones. This is where realism becomes more important than ambition. A small habit you maintain for years is infinitely more powerful than an aggressive routine you abandon after 3 weeks. Systems must respect human energy. They must account for stress, unpredictability, and emotional fluctuation. Another critical element is environment design. Willpower is unreliable. Environment is powerful. If healthy food is visible and accessible, you are more likely to eat it. If your workspace is clean and distraction-free, you are more likely to focus. If your calendar reflects your priorities, you are more likely to live by them. You don't rise to your intentions. You fall to your environment. This applies to social environments as well. The people around you influence your standards. If your circle values growth, discipline, and integrity, those behaviors feel normal. If your circle normalizes distraction and short-term thinking, maintaining high standards becomes harder. Sometimes the most impactful system upgrade is not a new routine, but a new environment. There is also an internal environment to consider. Your beliefs. If you believe you are bad with money, you will unconsciously avoid building financial systems. If you believe you are not disciplined, you will interpret small failures as confirmation. Over time, these beliefs solidify into self-fulfilling systems. Challenging limiting beliefs is not about blind optimism. It is about questioning outdated narratives. If identity shapes behavior, and behavior reinforces identity, then carefully choosing what you believe about yourself becomes a structural decision. You can design your internal dialogue just as deliberately as your calendar. As you refine your systems, something subtle begins to change. You feel less urgency and more direction. Urgency is reactive. Direction is intentional. Instead of scrambling to fix immediate problems, you spend more time strengthening foundations. And strong foundations reduce future problems. For example, clear communication systems in a business prevent misunderstandings. Regular maintenance in health prevents chronic issues. Transparent budgeting prevents financial conflict. Preventative systems may not feel exciting, but they reduce chaos dramatically. Over time, you start to experience a different kind of confidence. It is not loud or flashy. It is quiet assurance. You know that even if challenges arise, your structure can handle them. You are not relying on hope. You are relying on design. But there is a final truth that ties everything together. Systems are not just about productivity, money, or performance. They are about meaning. If you build efficient systems that generate wealth but neglect relationships, something will feel empty. If you optimize your schedule for output but ignore rest and reflection, burnout will follow. A truly powerful system aligns with your deeper values. You must ask yourself what kind of life you are engineering. Do you want time freedom? Then design systems that reduce dependency on constant labor. Do you want deep relationships? Then create recurring spaces for connection. Do you want intellectual growth? Then build reading and thinking into your daily rhythm. Do you want peace? Then design margins instead of filling every hour. The structure you create becomes the life you live. In the end, the power of systems is not in rigid control. It is in intentional design. It is the understanding that about what matters and the patience to build processes that support it. Once you accept that every outcome is downstream of a system, you stop chasing quick fixes. You start asking better questions. What process created this result? What small adjustment would improve it? What can I automate, simplify, or remove? What deserves reinforcement? Life becomes less mysterious and more manageable. And perhaps the most empowering realization of all is this: you are already running systems every single day. The only question is whether they are accidental or intentional. When you begin designing them consciously, you step into a different role. You are no longer just reacting to life. You are architecting it. And that shift, from participant to designer, is where lasting transformation truly begins. There comes a quiet moment, after you've understood all of this, when the conversation turns inward. You stop asking how to build better systems for productivity or money or health. You begin asking a more personal question: what kind of person am I becoming through the systems I run every day? Because in the end, systems are not mechanical. They are deeply human. They shape not only outcomes, but character. If you wake up each day and immediately expose your mind to noise, outrage, and distraction, your inner world slowly becomes scattered. If you regularly practice focus, reflection, and deliberate thinking, your inner world becomes calm and sharp. If you consistently choose comfort over challenge, your tolerance for discomfort shrinks. If you repeatedly lean into difficult but meaningful actions, your courage grows quietly in the background. Character is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in structured repetition. This is why the power of systems extends far beyond performance. It reaches into identity. And identity, more than anything else, determines destiny. Most people think identity is something they discover. In reality, it is something they construct. Not through declarations, but through patterns. If you consistently follow through on small commitments, you begin to see yourself as reliable. If you repeatedly break promises to yourself, even small ones, you internalize the opposite. Self-trust is a byproduct of your systems. And self-trust is foundational. Without it, every goal feels uncertain. You hesitate before committing because you are unsure whether you will follow through. But when your life is structured in a way that supports consistency, you begin to trust your own word. That trust compounds into confidence. Not loud confidence, but stable confidence. There is also a subtle peace that comes with well-designed systems. When you know that important areas of your life are being handled through structure, your mind relaxes. Bills are paid automatically. Investments are allocated by rule. Health is supported by routine. Relationships are nurtured intentionally. You are not constantly scanning for what you might be forgetting. Mental clarity increases when structural chaos decreases. This clarity creates space. And in that space, deeper thinking becomes possible. Creativity becomes possible. Strategic insight becomes possible. Instead of being consumed by maintenance, you can focus on direction. Direction matters. It is easy to build systems that keep you busy. It is harder to build systems that move you toward something meaningful. Efficiency alone is not enough. You can become extremely efficient at climbing the wrong mountain. So periodically, you must zoom out. Are your systems aligned with the life you actually want? Or are they optimized for external validation? Are you building for long-term fulfillment or short-term recognition? These questions are not answered once. They are revisited over time. As you mature, your definition of success may change. What mattered at 25 may not matter at 45. A system that once served ambition may need to evolve to serve balance. This is not failure. It is growth. The power lies in staying conscious. Conscious system design turns life into an intentional practice. Instead of drifting into habits inherited from culture, family, or circumstance, you begin choosing deliberately. You become selective about what you automate. You become protective of your attention. You become careful about where your time flows. And over years, those small structural decisions create a life that feels distinctly yours. There is also humility in this approach. You accept that you are human. You accept that motivation fluctuates. You accept that emotions sometimes cloud judgment. Rather than fighting these realities, you design around them. You build safeguards for your weaknesses. You create routines that support you when discipline is low. This is not self-temptation instead of constantly resisting it. They schedule important work instead of hoping to find time. They review their performance regularly instead of assuming they are improving. Over time, this mindset changes how you view problems. When something breaks, you no longer react with frustration alone. You investigate. What part of the structure allowed this? Where is the friction? What assumption proved false? Every setback becomes data. And data, when examined calmly, leads to refinement. This continual refinement is what separates stagnation from growth. Many people build a system once and then operate on autopilot indefinitely. But environments change, markets shift, personal priorities evolve. Without periodic redesign, even good systems become outdated. So you build in reflection. Perhaps once a week, you review your habits. Once a month, you assess your finances. Once a quarter, you revisit your larger direction. Once a year, you step back and question everything. These moments of evaluation prevent drift. Drift is subtle. It happens slowly. You adjust to small compromises. You allow small inefficiencies. You tolerate minor misalignments. Over years, those small deviations compound into significant divergence from your intended path. Systems, when monitored, keep you aligned. And alignment brings a unique kind of satisfaction. Not excitement, not adrenaline, but coherence. Your actions match your values. Your calendar reflects your priorities. Your daily behavior supports your long-term vision. When there is coherence, life feels lighter. Perhaps the most important realization of all is that you do not need perfect systems to begin. You only need better ones. Improvement is incremental. You upgrade one routine. You automate one decision. You remove one source of friction. You add one protective rule. Over time, the structure strengthens. You do not need a dramatic reinvention. You need thoughtful iteration. The power of systems is not loud. It does not demand attention. It works quietly in the background, shaping who you become and what you experience. It turns ordinary days into meaningful progress. It transforms small efforts into substantial results. And once you truly understand this, you stop waiting for the right mood or the perfect opportunity. You begin designing, carefully, patiently, intentionally, because you recognize that the quality of your systems will determine the quality of your life. And that is a responsibility and an opportunity worth taking seriously. At some point, after you've refined your routines, strengthened your structures, and aligned your systems with your values, a deeper realization begins to settle in. Systems are not just tools for improvement. They are frameworks for freedom. Most people misunderstand freedom. They imagine it as the absence of constraints. No schedule, no obligations, no structure, total spontaneity. But when you observe closely, a life without structure often becomes chaotic. Decisions pile up, responsibilities blur together, important tasks get delayed, stress quietly increases. Real freedom does not come from removing structure. It comes from choosing the right structure. When your finances are automated and disciplined, you gain freedom from constant money anxiety. When your health habits are consistent, you gain freedom from avoidable illness and fatigue. When your business runs on clear processes, you gain freedom from being indispensable in every small decision. When your time is structured intentionally, you gain freedom from distraction. In other words, structure removes friction from the future. There is something deeply reassuring about knowing that certain areas of your life are handled. You do not need to renegotiate them every day. You do not need to rely on fluctuating motivation. The system quietly carries the load. This creates mental spaciousness. And mental spaciousness is rare. Most people operate in reactive mode. Messages demand attention. Problems demand solutions. Deadlines demand urgency. Without strong systems, you are constantly putting out small fires. There is no room to think long term. No room to ask larger questions. But when your foundational systems are stable, you can step back. You can think strategically. You can reflect on purpose, direction, and contribution. You move from surviving the day to designing the decade. This is where systems intersect with legacy. If you build a business dependent entirely on your presence, it may generate income, but it will not outlast you. If you build one with documented processes, leadership development, and scalable operations, it can continue beyond your system's scale impact. They allow your values and standards to persist even when you are not physically present. In this way, they become extensions of your thinking. Carefully designed systems reflect your philosophy in action. But there is a quiet warning here as well. If you neglect intentional design, systems will still form. Organizations drift into bureaucracies. Families drift into disconnection. Individuals drift into distraction. Drift is the default when design is absent. That is why conscious review is essential. Not obsessive control, but regular awareness. You pause and ask, is this still serving us? Is this process creating the outcome we want? Where has inefficiency crept in? Where have we tolerated mediocrity? The courage to ask those questions keeps systems alive. There is also an emotional maturity required at this stage. Once you understand the power of systems, you can no longer blame circumstances as easily. You recognize your agency. If something consistently produces poor results, you know that redesign is possible. That awareness brings responsibility. Responsibility can feel heavy if you view it as pressure, but it feels empowering if you view it as authorship. You are not merely reacting to life. You are writing it, slowly, deliberately, through repeated structural choices. And here is something subtle but important: systems are most powerful when they become invisible. At the beginning, building a new routine requires attention. You think about it, you remind yourself, you track it, but over time, it fades into the background. It becomes normal, just part of how you operate. That is the moment transformation has truly occurred. You no longer feel like someone trying to be disciplined. You simply live in a disciplined way. You no longer feel like someone working on financial stability. You operate within financial clarity. You no longer feel like someone pursuing balance. Your calendar reflects it naturally. When systems integrate into identity, effort decreases while results continue. This is compounding in its purest form. Small structural improvements, sustained over years, produce exponential returns. Not only financially, but emotionally and intellectually. And yet, despite all of this, it is important to remain humble. No system will eliminate uncertainty. No structure will guarantee permanent success. Markets fluctuate. Health can change unexpectedly. Relationships require ongoing care. Life will always contain unpredictability. The purpose of systems is not to control the uncontrollable. It is to increase stability within uncertainty, to create buffers, to build resilience, to expand optionality. If you internalize this, you begin to approach life differently. You stop chasing dramatic change. You start seeking structural improvement. You stop obsessing over outcomes you cannot fully control. You start mastering inputs you can. And perhaps most importantly, you become patient. Patience grows when you trust your systems. You understand that meaningful results take time. You are less tempted by shortcuts because you recognize their fragility. You are less shaken by temporary setbacks because you know your foundation is strong. Over time, this patience creates calm, and calm creates clarity, and clarity improves decision making. The cycle reinforces itself. In the end, the power of systems is not about productivity hacks or rigid routines. It is about living deliberately. It is about replacing randomness with thoughtful design. It is about building a life where your daily actions quietly support your deepest priorities. You do not need to control everything. You only need to take ownership of what repeats, because what repeats defines you. If you can shape what repeats, your habits, your processes, your standards, your reviews, you can shape your trajectory. Slowly, steadily, intentionally. And when you look back years from now, the transformation may not feel dramatic. It will feel earned. The result of countless small structural decisions made with care. That is the quiet power of systems. It does not shout. It compounds. There is one final layer that often goes unnoticed, even after you understand everything about structure, discipline, and design. It is this: systems are ultimately about energy. Not time, not money, not productivity. Energy. Every day, you wake up with a finite amount of mental, emotional, and physical energy. How that energy is directed determines the quality of your outcomes. Systems are simply the channels that decide where that energy flows. If your systems are weak, your energy leaks. But when your systems are strong, your energy is preserved and directed. Important tasks are handled early. Repetitive decisions are automated. Boundaries protect your focus. Emotional triggers are anticipated and managed. Instead of scattering your energy, you concentrate it. Concentrated energy creates depth, and depth creates excellence. This is why some people appear calm under pressure. It is not because they feel no stress. It is because their systems prevent chaos from spreading. They have clear priorities. They know what to ignore. They have buffers built into their schedules. They have rules for decision making. They conserve energy for what truly matters. Energy management is life management. Think about how many conflicts arise not from major crises, but from depleted reserves. Lack of sleep leads to irritability. Financial disorganization leads to anxiety. Poor planning leads to rushed decisions. These are not character flaws. They are structural energy drains. When you correct the structure, you reduce the drain. A simple sleep system, consistent bedtime, reduced evening stimulation, dark environment, can improve mood, cognition, and patience. A clear budgeting system reduces background stress. A defined work schedule prevents constant mental switching. These adjustments may seem small, but they reclaim enormous amounts of energy. And reclaimed energy can be reinvested. Reinvested into learning, into building, into nurturing relationships, into creative work, into long-term strategy. This is where systems become transformative. They allow you to operate below your maximum stress threshold most of the time. Instead of living at the edge of burnout, you function within sustainable intensity. Sustainability is underrated. Short bursts of extreme effort can produce temporary results, but sustainable systems produce enduring impact. They allow you to remain consistent across decades, not just seasons. And long-term consistency almost always outperforms short-term intensity. There is also a profound psychological shift that happens when you trust your systems to manage energy wisely. You stop feeling guilty for resting. You understand that rest is not laziness, it is maintenance. You stop glorifying constant hustle. You recognize that exhaustion is often a design flaw, not a badge of honor. A well-designed system includes recovery. Athletes understand this intuitively. Training is structured. Intensity is balanced with rest. Performance improves not during exertion, but during recovery. The same principle applies to intellectual and emotional work. If you never disconnect, your thinking becomes shallow. If you never pause, your creativity declines. Systems that respect energy create longevity. There is another dimension here: attention. Attention is a form of energy. Where you place it shapes your reality. If your systems constantly expose you to noise, comparison, and urgency, your internal state becomes reactive. If your systems prioritize depth, learning, and reflection, your internal state becomes grounded. Guarding attention is no longer optional in a distracted world. It must be structural. Notifications limited. Information sources chosen deliberately. Periods of uninterrupted focus scheduled intentionally. These are not extreme measures. They are protective mechanisms. And protection creates clarity. When your attention is clear, your decisions improve. When your decisions improve, your outcomes improve. Over time, this compounding effect becomes significant. But perhaps the most powerful realization of all is this: you do not need to overhaul your entire life to harness this power. You only need to improve the systems that drain the most energy first. Find the biggest leak. Is it financial uncertainty? Build a simple, automated structure. Is it digital distraction? Create boundaries around device use. Is it unclear priorities? Design a weekly planning ritual. Is it health instability? Establish one foundational habit, like consistent sleep or daily movement. Solve the highest impact structural weakness, and the rest of your life becomes easier to manage. This approach replaces overwhelm with strategy. Instead of feeling like everything needs to change, you identify leverage. You focus on architecture, not decoration. Over years, as you refine and protect your systems, something remarkable happens. You become less reactive to external noise. Trends excite you less. Panic influences you less. Urgency manipulates you less. Because you operate from structure, not impulse. You become steady. Steadiness is powerful. In investing, it prevents emotional buying and selling. In relationships, it prevents unnecessary conflict. In business, it prevents reckless expansion. Responsibility increases. Influence increases. Not because you chase them, but because your structure makes you reliable. In the end, the power of systems is not about control, perfection, or rigid discipline. It is about stewardship. You are a steward of your time, a steward of your energy, a steward of your attention, a steward of your relationships and resources. Systems are the tools that help you manage that stewardship wisely. Without them, life feels scattered. With them, life feels directed. And direction, sustained over time, becomes destiny. If you truly understand this, you will approach tomorrow differently. Not with dramatic promises. Not with emotional intensity. But with quiet intention. You will look at your day and ask a simple question: what structure would make the best action the easiest action? Then you will design it. And you will repeat. Because what you repeat, you become. And what you become determines everything. When you look back across everything we've explored, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The quality of your life is not decided in rare, dramatic moments. It is decided in the quiet architecture of ordinary days. Most people wait for turning points, a new opportunity, a crisis, a sudden wave of motivation. They believe transformation arrives in visible milestones, but real transformation is subtle. It happens when you redesign how your days are structured, when you change what repeats, when you shift from reacting to building. That shift is not loud. It is deeply personal. There is a moment when you realize no one is coming to organize your life for you. No one will build your financial stability. No one will protect your focus. No one will design your health routines. No one will structure your growth. That responsibility belongs to you. And strangely, that realization is freeing. Because once you accept authorship, you stop feeling like a passenger. You stop blaming circumstances for every setback. You begin to see friction as a design issue. You begin to see stress as feedback. You begin to see inconsistency as a structural gap, not a moral flaw. That perspective changes your emotional relationship with challenges. Instead of frustration, you feel curiosity. Instead of shame, you feel responsibility. Instead of panic, you feel a desire to adjust the system. Over time, this mindset becomes automatic. You lose a client. Instead of spiraling, you evaluate your pipeline system. You feel mentally scattered. Instead of criticizing yourself, you examine your attention boundaries. Your savings feel thin. Instead of wishing for luck, you redesign your financial flow. Problems become prompts for refinement. And refinement, repeated over years, builds something extraordinary: stability with progress. Many people experience cycles. They improve rapidly, then regress. They build momentum, then burn out. They save money, then overspend. They focus deeply, then drift. These cycles often exist because the underlying systems were never strong enough to support consistency. When your systems are mature, the cycles flatten. Progress becomes steadier. Emotional swings soften. The highs are less manic. The lows are less catastrophic. You operate within a narrower, more controlled range. This does not make life boring. It makes it sustainable. Sustainability allows you to think in decades instead of weeks. It allows you to build compounding assets: financial, intellectual, relational. It allows you to plant seeds you may not see fully grown for years. There is patience in this approach, but it is not passive patience. It is active construction. Each day becomes a small brick. You wake up and run the system. You review when necessary. You adjust when appropriate. You protect your energy. You honor your priorities. You reinforce your standards. None of it feels dramatic. But 10 years later, it feels extraordinary. The people who master systems often appear disciplined, focused, even lucky. But what you are really seeing is alignment over time. Their daily structure supports their stated values. Their routines reflect their ambitions. Their environment reinforces their intentions. There is very little internal conflict. Internal conflict is exhausting. Wanting success but tolerating distraction. Wanting health but enabling poor habits. Wanting wealth but avoiding financial clarity. Systems reduce this tension. They close the gap between what you say you want and what you actually do. When that gap narrows, self-respect grows. And self-respect is powerful. It influences how you negotiate, how you set boundaries, how you handle pressure, how you pursue opportunity. It radiates quietly through your decisions. But there is still one final insight worth holding: connection and presence. When your finances are organized, you can be generous without anxiety. When your work processes are clear, you can innovate without chaos. When your routines protect your health, you can engage life with vitality. Structure supports aliveness. It does not suppress it. If at any point your systems begin to feel suffocating, it is not a failure of discipline. It is a signal for redesign. Remember, systems exist to serve your deeper vision. They are flexible frameworks, not prisons. Revisit them. Refine them. Simplify them if needed. Simplicity is often the highest form of mastery. The fewer moving parts required to produce meaningful results, the more resilient your life becomes. In the end, the power of systems comes down to one quiet commitment: to live intentionally, to refuse drift, to recognize that small repeated actions carry enormous weight, to understand that the future is not built in bursts of inspiration, but in daily design. If you carry this perspective forward, your focus will shift naturally. Instead of chasing motivation, you will build structure. Instead of obsessing over outcomes, you will refine inputs. Instead of waiting for change, you will engineer it. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your life will begin to reflect that engineering. Not because of luck, not because of talent alone, but because you chose to design what repeats. And what repeats, over time, becomes who you are. That is the quiet, enduring power of systems. If you've stayed with this idea long enough, you begin to notice something profound. Designing systems is not about controlling life. It is about respecting it. Respecting the fact that time moves forward whether you plan for it or not. Respecting the fact that small actions accumulate. Respecting the reality that neglect compounds just as powerfully as discipline. respecting your future self enough to build structures that will protect and support them. When you start thinking this way, you naturally become more intentional with even the smallest routines. You think about your mornings differently. The first hour of your day is no longer random. It becomes protective space. Instead of beginning with reaction, you begin with direction. You choose what enters your mind. You decide what deserves your focus. That simple structural shift changes the tone of everything that follows. You think about money differently. Every dollar is no longer just spending power, it becomes a vote for the kind of life you are constructing. Your financial system becomes an expression of your long-term thinking. Saving, investing, tracking, reviewing, these are not restrictions. They are signals of self-respect. You think about your time differently. If your calendar is full of things that do not align with your values, you no longer shrug it off. You redesign. You protect deep work. You schedule meaningful rest. You create recurring time for people who matter. Your calendar stops being a record of chaos and starts becoming proof of intention. And perhaps most importantly, you think about your standards differently. Standards are invisible systems. They are the rules you quietly follow, even when no one is watching. How prepared you are before meetings. How honest you are when mistakes happen. How consistent you are with commitments. These standards create reputations. And reputations open or close doors over time. When your standards are clear, decisions become easier. You do not debate endlessly. You measure options against principles already defined. That is another hidden strength of systems, they simplify complexity. The modern world is overwhelming. Endless information, endless opportunity, endless comparison. Without strong internal systems, it is easy to drift toward whatever feels urgent or exciting in the moment. But when your priorities are structured, noise loses its grip. You do not need to chase every opportunity. You do not need to respond to every trend. You do not need to compete in every arena. Your system filters for you. It tells you what aligns and what does not. This filtering is powerful because it preserves focus. Focus, sustained over years, is rare, and rarity creates value. Many people underestimate how much progress comes simply from not switching directions constantly. A stable system that supports consistent effort in one meaningful direction can outperform scattered brilliance every time. But this kind of steadiness requires inner clarity. You must know what you are building. You must be comfortable saying no. You must be willing to endure the slow pace of compounding without seeking constant validation. Systems protect you from your own impatience. They remind you that progress is over years. This identity solidifies. You see yourself as someone who honors structure, someone who thinks long-term, someone who refines instead of reacts, someone who builds instead of blames. That self-perception becomes one of your greatest assets, because when you believe you are a builder, you approach problems differently. You do not feel defeated by setbacks. You look for structural upgrades. You do not envy others' success blindly. You analyze the systems behind it. You do not depend on motivation. You depend on design. And gradually, almost quietly, your life becomes calmer. Not empty of challenges, but calmer in your response to them. Unexpected expenses arise, your financial buffers absorb the shock. A project fails, your review process extracts lessons. Energy dips, your health routines restore balance. Conflict emerges, your communication habits guide resolution. Instead of spiraling, you stabilize. That stability is not accidental. It is earned through repeated attention to structure. By this point, you may realize something else. You do not need to master dozens of systems. You only need a few core ones executed consistently. A system for managing attention. A system for managing money. A system for maintaining health. A system for continuous learning. A system for nurturing relationships. These foundational structures support almost everything else. When they are strong, complexity becomes manageable. When they are weak, even small challenges feel overwhelming. The goal is not perfection. Systems will always need refinement. You will miss days. You will make mistakes. You will outgrow old routines. That is natural. What matters is returning to the principle. When something feels off, ask what structure allowed it. When something works well, ask what system created it. When something feels chaotic, design clarity. Over time, this approach becomes second nature. You no longer view life as a series of random events. You see it as an evolving architecture. And perhaps that is the most empowering perspective of all. You are not just living inside circumstances. You are shaping patterns. You are not merely reacting to time. You are directing repetition. And repetition, guided wisely, is one of the most powerful forces available to you. So as you move forward, do not look for dramatic reinventions. Look for structural leverage. Do not chase motivation. Build environments that make action natural. Do not obsess over outcomes. Strengthen inputs. The power was never in intensity. It was always in design. Quiet, consistent, intentional design. Because in the end, your life will not be defined by what you occasionally attempt. It will be defined by what you systematically repeat. If you zoom out far enough, beyond daily routines and quarterly reviews, beyond productivity and performance, something even deeper becomes clear. Systems are how you honor the finite nature of your life. Time is limited. Energy is limited. Attention is limited. Whether you acknowledge it or not, you are allocating these resources every single day. The only real question is whether you are allocating them deliberately or accidentally. When you ignore systems, allocation happens by default. The loudest demand captures your attention. The most urgent expense consumes your money. The easiest option claims your time. And slowly, without realizing it, you build a life shaped by reaction rather than intention. But when you design systems, you are making a conscious statement: this is what matters. You are deciding in advance where your energy will flow. You are placing structure around what you value so that it is protected from distraction and neglect. You are building guardrails that keep you aligned even when emotions fluctuate. In this way, systems become an act of self-respect. They say, my future deserves structure. My priorities deserve protection. My potential deserves consistency. And that consistency is what separates dreams from outcomes. Many people have clarity about what they want. Fewer have the patience to construct the machinery required to achieve it. Vision without structure remains fantasy. Structure without vision becomes mechanical. But when vision and systems align, progress becomes almost inevitable. You see this clearly in long-term investors who commit to disciplined allocation strategies and hold through volatility. In entrepreneurs who refine processes year after year instead of chasing every new tactic. In individuals who treat their health not as a seasonal project but as a lifelong system. Their success is rarely explosive. It is steady. It compounds. Compounding is quiet. It rarely attracts attention in the beginning. But over long horizons, reputation compounds when your standards remain high across years. Confidence compounds when you repeatedly prove to yourself that you can follow through. Every area of life responds to structured repetition. At some point, you begin to trust this truth deeply. You stop searching for shortcuts. You stop envying sudden success stories. You understand that even those stories often rest on years of unseen structure. This understanding brings calm. You are no longer in a hurry to become someone else overnight. You are focused on becoming slightly better each week through refined systems. You are comfortable with slow improvement because you know slow improvement, sustained long enough, becomes extraordinary. And there is a quiet satisfaction in that. A satisfaction that comes not from applause, but from alignment. From knowing your daily actions match your long-term intentions. From seeing your environment reflect your values. From feeling your life move in a deliberate direction. Of course, there will still be unpredictability. Life will introduce surprises, losses, opportunities, and challenges you could not foresee. Systems are not shields against reality. They are anchors within it. When storms come, anchored lives drift less. Your financial systems create cushions. Your health systems create resilience. Your learning systems create adaptability. Your relational systems create support. These foundations do not remove difficulty, but they prevent collapse. And perhaps that is one of the greatest gifts of intentional structure: it reduces fragility. A fragile life breaks under pressure. A structured life bends, adjusts, and continues. Over the long arc of decades, that difference matters more than any single breakthrough. Eventually, you may realize something simple but profound: designing systems is designing your future self. The habits you reinforce today shape the capabilities you will have tomorrow. The money you manage wisely today becomes the freedom you experience later. The skills you practice consistently today become the opportunities available to you in the future. Future you is built quietly, through present structure. And once you fully understand that, procrastination begins to look different. Neglect looks different. You see clearly how small inconsistencies today create larger constraints tomorrow. That awareness does not create fear. It creates responsibility. Responsibility, embraced calmly, becomes empowerment. You are not waiting for ideal circumstances. You are not hoping for motivation to strike. You are not relying on intensity. You are building systems that make progress the default. And when progress becomes the default, confidence follows naturally. Not the loud kind. Not the performative kind. The steady kind. The kind rooted in evidence. You have seen your systems work. You have watched small efforts accumulate. You have adjusted and refined over time. You trust the process because you designed it. That trust changes how you move through the world. You take calculated risks because your foundations are solid. You remain composed under pressure because your routines stabilize you. You think long-term because your systems support patience. In the end, the power of systems is not in rigid control, relentless discipline, or perfect execution. It is in conscious repetition. It is in the decision to build structures that reflect who you want to become. It is in honoring your time, your energy, and your potential with thoughtful design. Because your life, whether you plan it or not, will be shaped by what you repeat. If you choose those repetitions carefully, if you design them with intention and refine them with humility, then over years, they will shape something remarkable. Not through intensity, not through luck, but through structure. And structure, sustained patiently, becomes destiny. There is one last truth that ties everything together, and it is quieter than all the rest. In the end, systems are a form of self-leadership. Before you can lead a company, a family, a team, or a movement, you must be able to lead yourself. And self-leadership is not about motivation speeches you give yourself in moments of inspiration. It is about the structures you obey when no one is watching. It is easy to feel ambitious. It is harder to live in alignment with that ambition daily. Systems close that gap. They turn intentions into scheduled actions. They turn values into recurring behaviors. They turn goals into routines. They transform abstract desires into physical patterns. When you build and follow your own systems, you are practicing integrity. You are saying that your word to yourself matters, that your future matters, that your standards are not negotiable depending on to stay steady when emotions fluctuate. It is the discipline to continue refining instead of restarting every few months. Systems cultivate that steadiness. They create rhythm in your life, and rhythm reduces resistance. Think about music. A consistent rhythm allows creativity to flourish within it. Without rhythm, there is noise. With rhythm, there is flow. In the same way, when your days have structure, you experience more flow. You waste less energy deciding. You hesitate less. You transition more smoothly between responsibilities. The rhythm carries you. And once rhythm becomes natural, excellence feels less forced. But there is also grace in this philosophy. Because no system will be perfect. You will have seasons where routines break. Illness, travel, major life changes, these will interrupt even the strongest structures. The goal is not rigid perfection. It is return. Return to the rhythm. Return to the standards. Return to the review process. Return to the design. The faster you return, the less drift occurs. Over years, this habit of returning becomes one of your greatest assets. You do not spiral when things slip. You recalibrate. You do not abandon structure because of one bad week. You rebuild. You treat misalignment as temporary, not defining. That resilience compounds just like everything else. There is also a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your progress is not dependent on constant external validation. You are not waiting for applause to confirm your direction. Your system already confirms it. You see the metrics. You track the habits. You review the data. You know whether you are aligned. This internal scoreboard becomes more important than public recognition, and that shifts your focus dramatically. You stop performing for attention. You start building for longevity. Longevity requires patience. It requires pacing. It requires the humility to understand that the life you are constructing may take years to fully materialize. But if the foundation is solid, time becomes your ally instead of your enemy. Many people fear time because they feel behind. They compare themselves to others and see gaps. But when you trust your systems, comparison loses its intensity. You understand that every person is operating under different structures, different priorities, different timelines. You focus on strengthening your own architecture. That focus creates calm momentum. Momentum without panic. Progress without exhaustion. Growth without chaos. And eventually, the external results begin to mirror the internal order. Opportunities increase. Stability deepens. Relationships strengthen. Financial security expands. Not because of a single breakthrough, but because your systems have been quietly compounding. When you reach that stage, you may realize something almost surprising. The real reward was not the outcomes. It was the person you became while building them. More disciplined, more patient, more thoughtful, more intentional, more grounded. Systems shape character, and character shapes destiny far more reliably than talent alone. So as you move forward, remember this: you do not need extraordinary intensity to create an extraordinary life. You need extraordinary consistency in ordinary actions. You need to care enough about your future to build structure today. You need to review, refine, and protect what repeats. Because what repeats will outlast emotion. What repeats will outlast temporary setbacks. What repeats will shape your identity, your opportunities, and your legacy. And when you look back after years of living this way, the transformation will not feel sudden. It will feel logical. It will feel earned. You will see clearly how each small structural decision led to the next. How each refinement strengthened the foundation. How each return to your rhythm preserved your direction. That is the quiet promise behind the power of systems. They do not demand drama. They ask for design. They do not require perfection. They require commitment. And if you are willing to commit, not with intensity, but with steadiness, then your life will gradually reflect that choice. One day at a time. One structure at a time. one repeated action at a time, until the architecture of your days becomes the architecture of your destiny. At the very end of this journey, everything becomes surprisingly simple. You realize that life is not changed by what you intend once in a while. It is changed by what you install permanently. That word matters, install. A goal is something you aim at. A system is something you install. Once installed, it runs. It does not ask you for permission every morning. It does not negotiate with your mood. You no longer need to feel inspired to act in alignment with your priorities. The structure already exists. You simply step into it, and that is where real maturity begins. Maturity is not about intensity. It is about stability. It is about designing a life that does not collapse when emotions fluctuate. It is about building foundations strong enough to carry you through seasons of uncertainty, boredom, stress, and even doubt. Because there will be seasons like that. There will be periods where progress feels slow, where results are invisible, where effort feels repetitive, where others seem to be moving faster. In those moments, your systems are what protect you from abandoning your path. They remind you that compounding is not dramatic. It is patient. They remind you that consistency beats brilliance over long horizons. They remind you that small, correct actions, repeated, always outperform sporadic bursts of enthusiasm. And over years, this mindset changes the way you experience success. Success stops feeling like a distant peak you must climb with exhaustion. It starts feeling like a natural outcome of alignment. When your daily actions reflect your long-term values, success becomes a byproduct. You no longer chase it desperately. You build toward it deliberately. There is also a quiet sense of control that comes from this approach, not control over the world, but control over your contribution. You cannot predict every outcome. You cannot eliminate every risk. But you can design how you show up each day. You can design how you manage your money. You can design how you protect your health. You can design how you nurture relationships. You can design how you think and learn. You can design how you respond to pressure. And those designs, repeated consistently, shape nearly everything that follows. At some point, you begin to see your life as an operating system. Inputs come in. Decisions are processed. Outputs are produced. If you do not like the outputs, you do not panic. You adjust the code. You upgrade the process. You simplify the structure. You remove friction. You automate wisely. You reinforce what works. You eliminate what drains. Over time, this way of thinking makes you calmer in every area of life. When others react emotionally, you step back and look for the system underneath the problem. When something succeeds, you analyze the mechanism that created it. You become less surprised by outcomes because you understand their origins. And that understanding builds confidence. Not ego. Not arrogance. Confidence rooted in awareness. You know that if you maintain and refine your systems, progress will continue. Maybe not on your preferred timeline. Maybe not in the exact shape you imagined. But directionally, forward. There is peace in that. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all is this: designing systems is an ongoing act of self-respect. It is saying, my time matters. It is saying, my energy deserves protection. It is saying, my future is worth building carefully. Every time you refine a routine, every time you automate a wise decision, every time you protect your focus, every time you review your progress honestly, you are investing in a more stable, intentional version of yourself. Over a lifetime, that investment becomes profound. Because destiny is not decided in a single moment. It is built in daily structure. If there is one idea to carry forward, let it be this: do not try to control everything. Control what repeats. Do not chase motivation. Build environments that make action natural. Do not rely on intensity. Rely on structure. Do not aim for perfection. Aim for consistency and refinement. And when life inevitably changes, as it always does, return to the principle. Observe, adjust, simplify, strengthen. Keep designing. Keep refining. Keep aligning your daily systems with your deepest values. Because in the quiet architecture of your ordinary days, your extraordinary future is already being constructed. And that is the enduring, deeply human power of systems. As everything settles, there is one final shift that completes the picture. You begin to understand that systems are not something you build once and then forget. They are a relationship. A relationship with your habits. A relationship with your standards. A relationship with your future self. And like any meaningful relationship, it requires attention, not obsession, not rigidity, but steady care. At this stage, you no longer think in terms of fixing your life. That urgency disappears. Instead, you think in terms of maintenance and evolution. Just as a well-built home still requires cleaning, small repairs, and occasional renovation, a well-built life requires periodic notice, adjust, and return. The return becomes automatic. That is when you know the philosophy has truly taken root. Because the goal was never perfection. It was stability. There is something deeply grounding about knowing that your life is not dependent on heroic effort. You do not need to wake up every morning reinventing yourself. You do not need to rely on willpower to carry you through the day. Your systems hold you, and in holding you, they free you. Free you to think more deeply. Free you to take smarter risks. Free you to be present with people. Free you to rest without guilt. Free you to build patiently without panic. Freedom through structure, that is the quiet paradox most people miss. The world often glorifies spontaneity, hustle, and constant reinvention. But those who build durable lives understand something different. They understand that steadiness outperforms chaos. That intentional repetition shapes identity. That the future belongs not to the most intense, but to the most consistent. If you zoom out even further, you start to see how this applies to society as well. Strong institutions are built on reliable systems. Enduring companies rely on process, not personality alone. Healthy families thrive on shared rituals and clear expectations. Even personal peace often rests on simple daily practices repeated over time. Systems scale beyond the individual. They shape culture. They shape communities. They shape legacies. But it all begins internally. It begins with the simple decision to design what repeats in your own life. To look at your days honestly. To remove what weakens you. To reinforce what strengthens you. To automate what can be automated. To protect what matters most. To review regularly. To adjust humbly. And to keep going. There is something almost meditative about this approach. It turns life into a craft. Each habit is a brushstroke. Each routine is a foundation beam. Each review is a quiet moment of inspection. Over time, the structure becomes stronger, more elegant, more aligned. You may not notice the transformation day to day, but years later, when you compare who you were to who you have become, the difference will be undeniable. Not because of one dramatic decision, but because you chose to design. That choice, repeated, changes everything. And here is perhaps the most calming thought of all: you do not need to control the entire future to build a meaningful one. You only need to control the systems you operate today. Today's structure becomes tomorrow's momentum. Tomorrow's momentum becomes next year's stability. Next year's stability becomes a lifetime of intentional living. There is nothing flashy about it, nothing loud, nothing that demands attention, but it works. It always works. Because repetition, guided by clarity, is one of the most powerful forces available to a human being. So as you close this reflection, do not feel pressure to redesign your entire life overnight. That would contradict the very philosophy you now understand. Instead, look for one system, one daily structure that, if improved, would create meaningful leverage. Refine it, protect it, let it run. Then, when it becomes natural, refine the next. Piece by piece, your life will reorganize itself around intention. And one day, without realizing exactly when it happened, you will look around and see a life that feels steady, aligned, and earned. Not built by bursts of emotion, not carried by luck, but constructed carefully, patiently, intelligently. That is the final lesson. You become what you systematize. And when you systematize what truly matters, you quietly become your strongest, clearest, most intentional self. If you sit with all of this long enough, the idea becomes almost poetic in its simplicity. Your life is not a collection of big moments. It is a collection of repeated days. And repeated days are shaped by systems. That realization changes how you see tomorrow morning. It changes how you see your calendar, your bank account, your habits, your conversations. Nothing feels neutral anymore. Everything is either reinforcing the direction you want, or quietly pulling you away from it. This is not meant to create pressure. It is meant to create awareness. Because awareness gives you choice. Without awareness, you drift into routines built by convenience, culture, or emotion. With awareness, you design routines built by intention. The difference between those two paths becomes enormous over time. You begin to notice small things. How you speak to yourself when something goes wrong. How quickly you reach for distraction. How often you delay important decisions. How consistently you follow through on simple commitments. These are not random behaviors. They are you create a reminder. You automate a transfer. You block time for deep work. It feels deliberate, slightly unnatural. But over time, repetition removes resistance. The new pattern becomes familiar. Familiar becomes comfortable. Comfortable becomes automatic. And automatic becomes who you are. This is why systems are so powerful. They bypass the constant debate inside your mind. They remove negotiation. Instead of asking every day, should I do this? The answer is already built into your structure. The decision has been made in advance, by your higher self, not your emotional self. That separation is critical. There are two versions of you operating at all times. The emotional self that reacts to the present moment, and the strategic self that thinks about long-term consequences. Systems allow the strategic self to design guardrails for the emotional self. Without those guardrails, short-term impulses dominate. With them, long-term priorities win more often. This is not about suppressing emotion. It is about preventing emotion from steering your life unchecked. When your systems are aligned with your long-term values, you experience less internal conflict. You do not wake up regretting yesterday. You do not lie awake anxious about tomorrow. You know your structure is moving you forward, even on days when progress feels invisible. That invisible progress is important. Much of the most meaningful growth in life is not visible at first. Savings accumulate quietly. Skills deepen slowly. Relationships strengthen through ordinary conversations. Health improves through consistent small behaviors. If you only look for dramatic change, you will miss the compounding happening beneath the surface. Systems train you to appreciate subtle improvement. They shift your attention from immediate gratification to sustained alignment. And over time, this shift changes your temperament. You become less reactive, less impulsive, less desperate for quick wins. You become more grounded, more patient, more strategic. Patience, supported by structure, is powerful. Because when others burn out from intensity, you continue steadily. When others abandon their plans from frustration, you refine yours calmly. When others chase trends, you strengthen foundations. This steadiness builds quiet authority. People begin to trust you. Not because you are loud or dramatic, but because you are consistent. Your behavior matches your words. Your progress matches your promises. Your results match your systems. And trust compounds in ways that are hard to measure but impossible to ignore. Eventually, you may reach a point where the philosophy becomes instinctive. You encounter a problem, and your first thought is not blame or panic, it is structure. What system allowed this? What structure would prevent it next time? What small adjustment would improve this process? You think like a designer. Designers do not complain about flaws, they refine them. They do not take imperfections personally, they treat them as feedback. That mindset removes unnecessary emotional weight from life. It replaces drama with iteration. Iteration is calm. It assumes improvement is possible. It assumes that better design leads to better outcomes. It keeps you focused on action rather than rumination. And this is where the deepest freedom lies. You are no longer at the mercy of randomness. You are participating in shaping your trajectory. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. That sense of meaningful agency transforms how you experience time. Instead of feeling rushed or behind, you feel engaged. You see each day as an opportunity to reinforce what matters. You understand that greatness, however you define it, is not a single leap, it is reinforced direction. Reinforced direction becomes destiny. At this final stage, you no longer need reminders about motivation or discipline. You understand the mechanics. You understand the psychology. You understand the compounding effect. All that remains is commitment. Quiet, steady commitment to the systems that reflect your highest values. Not flashy commitment. Not public declarations. Just daily execution. Because in the end, life does not reward occasional intensity. It rewards sustained alignment. And sustained alignment is built, maintained, and protected through systems. So when you wake up tomorrow, do not ask whether you feel inspired. Ask whether your structure supports who you want to become. If it does, step into it. If it doesn't, refine it. Then repeat. Over years, that simple rhythm will carry you further than bursts of motivation ever could. That is the enduring truth. You do not rise to your wishes. You rise, or fall. When you finally reach the edge of this philosophy, everything grows quieter. There is no grand finale. No dramatic revelation waiting at the end. Just a calm understanding that the extraordinary is built from the ordinary, structured, repeated, and protected over time. You begin to see your days differently. Not as something to get through. Not as something to survive. But as something to shape. The power was never hiding in a single breakthrough. It was always sitting inside the design of your routines. Inside the way you handle small decisions. Inside the standards you uphold when no one is watching. And that realization shifts your relationship with effort. Effort no longer feels like pushing against resistance. It feels like maintaining alignment. When your systems are well designed, action flows more naturally. You don't rely on force. You rely on structure. There's a quiet elegance in that. Instead of constantly asking yourself to be stronger, more disciplined, more focused, you ask better questions. What would make the right action easier? What environment would reduce temptation? What rule would remove ambiguity? What schedule would protect what matters? You stop fighting yourself and start designing for yourself. And over time, something subtle happens. You feel lighter. Not because life becomes easy, but because it becomes organized. Because you are no longer negotiating with every impulse. Because your calendar reflects your priorities. Because your finances reflect your discipline. Because your health reflects your consistency. There is harmony between what you say you value and what you actually do. And harmony reduces internal noise. Internal noise is exhausting. The gap between intention and behavior drains energy. The quiet guilt of unfinished commitments drains confidence. The chaos of unstructured days drains clarity. Systems close those gaps. They create coherence. When your actions consistently support your values, you experience less friction within yourself. That coherence builds a deep sense of integrity, not moral superiority, but wholeness. You are not divided between who you want to be and who you are becoming. They are the same direction. At this point, you may realize that the true reward of systems was never productivity or wealth or achievement alone. It was self-respect. Self-respect grows when you trust your own patterns. When you know you will show up. When you know your word to yourself holds weight. When your life feels deliberate instead of accidental. That kind of self-respect is steady. It does not depend on applause or recognition. It exists quietly inside you. And from that place, ambition becomes healthier. You no longer chase success to prove something. You build patiently because you enjoy the process of refinement. You pursue growth not from insecurity, but from curiosity. You improve systems not out of fear, but out of commitment to excellence. Excellence, in this context, is not perfection. It is thoughtful repetition. It is doing simple things well, consistently, over long periods of time. There will still be seasons of challenge. Systems do not eliminate pain or uncertainty, but they reduce chaos. They provide anchors. They give you something stable to return to when life feels unstable. Return to your routines. Return to your reviews. Return to your standards. Return to your rhythm. That rhythm becomes your foundation. And foundations matter more than peaks. Anyone can have a peak moment, a burst of success, a sudden win, a streak of productivity. But without systems, peaks are followed by valleys just as quickly. With systems, progress becomes less dramatic, but more durable. Durability is underrated in a world obsessed with speed. But when you think in decades instead of days, durability becomes everything. A durable career, a durable reputation, a durable body, a durable set of relationships, a durable mind. Durability is built through systems that can withstand pressure, boredom, and time. And in the end, time is the ultimate multiplier. Time amplifies whatever you repeat. If you repeat distraction, time magnifies regret. If you repeat discipline, time magnifies freedom. If you repeat avoidance, time magnifies limitation. If you repeat structure, time magnifies opportunity. This is the quiet arithmetic of life. So perhaps the final lesson is simple. Stop looking for massive change. Start protecting small, powerful structures. Design mornings that ground you. Design finances that stabilize you. Design work processes that focus you. Design habits that strengthen you. Design relationships that nourish you. And once those designs are in place, respect them. Because what you respect, you maintain. What you maintain, you improve. It allows you to move through the world with calm confidence. To make decisions without constant second-guessing. To pursue long-term goals without burning out. To rest without guilt. To build without panic. All because you chose to take responsibility for what repeats. That is the full circle. The power of systems is not about control. It is about alignment. It is about shaping repetition. It is about honoring your time. It is about building quietly, steadily, patiently, until your daily structure reflects your highest priorities. And when that happens, success is no longer something you chase. It becomes something your systems naturally produce. That is where the journey leads. Not to intensity, not to perfection, but to thoughtful design, lived consistently enough to become your life.